Steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
Strap yourself in and get ready.
And here we go.
The leaders in fantasy football are incoming, giving you the ultimate insight to help you win your leagues and dominate your mates. You're now listening to the Insight NFL Show with your hosts, Guns and Maverick.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go!
Let's go! Go!
Alrighty, hello and welcome to the Insight NFL podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nathan from SuperCoach Guns, and with me, as always, is Matt from aka NFL Maverick. Matt, how are you going?
Not too good there, Guns. Based off the NFL Maverick, the Mavs did lose today. So yeah, pretty flat on that. But another episode, another week. We'll get it rolling.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Well, yeah, we started it last week, but we may as well get into the news from the week that's been. And right off the top, I suppose the biggest news is Justin Jefferson getting the highest non-quarterback deal in the NFL history. 4 years, $140 million. Across the 4 years, I'd say it's pretty worthwhile to pay him.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to make sure you get your biggest weapon pretty much in the NFL. That's a non-QB, and you sign him up long term, and that's what they've done. It pretty much now sets the scene for everyone else. CD Lamb and T Higgins, they're both sitting out of their OTAs at the moment, just walking laps up and down the field, doing nothing, just rocking up really. So, but yeah, for a Vikings perspective, yeah, they've done everything that you can ask for. There was a bit of concern going into the draft what they're going to do at QB, and Justin Jefferson was pretty much holding out, saying we've got to see what we do first at QB before I sign. So obviously, yeah, he's happy. So that's great news for the Vikings for sure.
It is great news, and it does set him up well because you've got JJ McCarthy, first round pick. You don't have to pay him for 4 years. You can pay Justin Jefferson. If JJ McCarthy ends up being the guy, you might have to move some stuff around. But, he's well and truly deserving of the money, and it's a good opportunity to pay him now that you've got a rookie quarterback in the building. Then you've got probably not quite as big news, but very relevant news nonetheless. Christian McCaffrey. Re-signed with the 49ers for 2 years, $19 million. I think it just reaffirms that, outside the equal best offensive weapon in the NFL stays on a high-level elite team.
Makes it even harder for the 49ers to know what they're doing moving forward as well. It's just another contract they've hit the books with. It's just more uncertainty for Ayuk and Debo and everything like that. So,
yeah,
Brock Purdy's going to get his payday sooner or later. So,
and when they pay him, it's like, well, I guess if is probably a fair statement as well. They might just decide that they are actually a quarterback-proof system, and let him go to free agency or lowball him. But I don't imagine he'll be re-signed beyond the deal, like after these 2 years, just because with running backs, once they're 30, they hit the graveyard essentially. But I don't know what they'll do. But yeah, worthwhile noting that McCaffrey's hanging around. It's also the largest running back contract in the league, or most per annum, I think. So that's quite surprising in itself, I suppose. Bijan Robinson, I was talking about the offense that the Atlanta Falcons will be running with, and he said that they're aiming to play pretty similar to how the 49ers play. The direct quote is they plan on running first, like how they use Christian McCaffrey down there in San Francisco. So, I mean, look, anytime your offense is going to be compared to the 49ers and you're going to use your high-level running back the way they use Christian McCaffrey, you're obviously pretty excited about that from a fantasy perspective. Does this change anything for you, though, in terms of how you're viewing Bijan?
I don't think it does. I don't think it does at all. I've always had him pretty much at the higher end of the league in rookie draft, or in draft, should I say. He's always going to be a top 3, top 4 pick, no matter what. And yeah, if he's going to eat, then bloody hell, he might be the number 1. But yeah, I don't know how to actually view this whole news. I don't know if he's just trying to put everything out there and saying that, hey, we've got a new QB, we're going to run first, or he's actually trying to make some sense out of what he's doing. So it's one to watch.
It's one to watch because it's a talented and exciting offense, and they could do anything down there, and it'd be better than what they did last year with their offense, to be honest. Well, okay, I haven't written this list up in order of importance. I've just basically written it in order of what's happened when, or towards the back part, it's got pretty random, as you will notice. But Logan Thomas signed with the San Francisco 49ers. He's tight end 2 there, obviously. You got George Kittle, who's firmly tight end 1. Anything happens to Kittle, though, like you've got a half decent streaming option. He's still got production left in him, I would say. But it's not a very fantasy relevant signing unless something happens to Kittle.
Yeah, spot on. That's absolutely right. Kittle, last couple of years, has been pretty banged up too. So from a 49ers perspective, they just want to make sure that they've got talent ready to go when or if he goes down. So that's a great signing for the 49ers. He's not going to take any snaps away from Kittle. It's not going to affect Kittle at all. It's not going to affect anyone at all, really, on any fantasy level. But for the 49ers, it's more of a depth piece. He probably will make the 53. He'll make the cut. I'd imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you'd think he makes a cut. Like I don't see him not. He's a very solid player. And he's around an average NFL tight end, I'd say, and so that's pretty good to have as your backup. Speaking of tight ends, well, there's one less in the league. Darren Waller has retired. I think we kind of expected this. I mean, we commented on it briefly last podcast, but we didn't get into the rookie that probably benefits the most of it, which is Theo Johnson. It's him versus Bellinger for tight end 1, and the talk is that Theo Johnson's the guy they like more, but purely because he's been in the NFL longer, they might give Daniel Bellinger first crack. How do you see that tight end situation playing out? And I guess, do you want any part of it this year?
No, I want no part of it. Like nothing to do with the Giants at all. I mean, I love Darren Waller as a player. He was such a beast, and it's a shame to see him go. I guess he's been at the Giants for a year or 2 now, so he's probably had enough of Danny Dimes and said, "Fuck this, I'm out." But yeah, no, I have read up on Waller. He's the last 3 years he's been banged up, and he's had some really bad stuff that's happened to him off field. And hopefully he's okay. He's going to move into the music industry, I've heard. So if he can hit, I mean, it's worth money.
Oh, we should get one of his songs as like the introduction music to Inside. That'd be great stuff. Jeez, I remember listening to the most recent one that came out, and it was bad. Like he got a fake Kelsey Plum in the video and everything. Like, oh jeez. Oh wow. Okay. Back to the NFL.
Yeah, he's gonna end up on SoundCloud.
Oh man. Yeah, he will be really done then. Now the Vikings. A piece came out from one of their defensive tackles, Harrison Phillips, that they're planning on using Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler as sort of a 1-2 punch in the backfield. Now, Look, I'm not going to say I don't think any of us expected Aaron Jones to be the 3-down back, right? Not at this stage in his career. And Ty Chandler had a pretty good season when he was given opportunities, but I also don't think he can handle a full workload. So this feels like a move that makes sense to me, using both of them. I suppose of the two, I mean, I think we both agree we probably go Aaron Jones over Ty Chandler.
Yeah. I think Aaron Jones is actually a very, very good running back in the league. Yeah, he's a bit older now and everything like that, but he's going to get you goal line carries. He absolutely feasted in the playoffs. He made that team a lot better when he came back from injury at the Packers. So obviously he moves now to a new offense that's going to be, you'd think, somewhat explosive. So he's going to see plenty of goal line carries. But Ty Chandler last year as well, when he filled in, he dominated. It was a great change of pace running back. And yeah, the second half of the year, he was pretty much startable all the way through. So yeah, I don't know. He's going to be obviously a 3rd-down back, I'd imagine, probably get some carries here and there. No goal lines, which is going to hurt fantasy production. But yeah, Aaron Jones is the one for sure.
I think if you have a look back to the final 5 weeks of the season, I think he got a fair few snaps and he was playing over 50% of the snaps. Maybe that's slightly high on what we should expect of him this season, but he had scores of 7.2, a 24.7 in which he was the sole running back and had 23 carries for 132 yards and a touchdown in that game. So he can actually handle a full load of carries. Ty Chandler, whether he can do it for a whole season, I don't think he can. It's really what I was referring to before. But as a handcuff, like he's one of those ones who has standalone value as well as being a 3-down back without Aaron Jones there. And then of course Aaron Jones, if there's no Ty Chandler. We're talking another 3-down back there as well, and both will perform really, really well in that Viking system as running backs have in the past, barring an Alexander Madison disaster class last year. Now, the next news, again, it only broke today, I think, or yesterday, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed Sterling Shepard. He had a few productive games back in 2022, and then this season, the Giants, or season just gone, the Giants did not care for his usage. I really don't think this is relevant unless you're in a deep, deep dynasty league, in which case you might get the odd bit of value here and there from him in game. But yeah, this one's pretty cut and dry. Don't need to worry about him too much, do we?
Well, I'm going to play the other side to it. Is there a world where he can be the other side of Mike Evans and play as the outside receiver and be that long ball threat? Obviously, Godwin's going to move back into the middle now and be that slot receiver. But can he carve out a long ball machine, Baker Mayfield, deep ball threat type of player? He has had a few long balls in his career. They do have McMillan they just drafted as well, so maybe he sees a bit more time. But he's going to have a big training camp.
He's going to have a big training camp because he's got to fight off Jalen McMillan, who we just spoke about. He's also got to get rid of Trey Palmer from the wide receiver 3 role. Look, I wouldn't be holding my breath on him unless you're in a deep league, even if it's redraft. Unless you're in a really deep league, he's not really that interesting for me. But hey, that can always change as we get closer to the season, I suppose.
Yeah, there's not a word where he can really carve out a role. I mean, you've got Rashad White, you've got Mike Evans, and then you've got Chris Godwin. So they should be your 3 relatively productive fantasy scorers on the Bucks. It's hard to have 4 really good ones, or even 4 average good ones, I suppose. But Sterling Shepard, unless it's an injury at some point, maybe.
And just on that, like they've still got Kate Otten as well, who they weren't afraid to use last year. So we're talking fifth in line for targets, even if he is a starting wide receiver. So, not much interest there. Another one with not much interest is McCole Hardman. Now, he's re-signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. But, they've just added 2 wide receivers in the off-season. The only way I see him getting any sort of sufficient game time is if, as we expect, Rashee Rice misses a fairly big chunk of game time this season, which, I don't know if that really affects Hardman's output, because he'll be on the field, sure, and he might get 1 or 2 catches a game, but they'll just centralize their targets more towards Kelsey and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great NFL move for the Chiefs. I mean, he scored the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl, so he knows the system really well. He's been there for a while. So it's, again, another weapon for Mahomes, who we'll speak about a bit later on. But, other than that, he's not really relevant fantasy-wise at all.
No. Now, on to your Dallas Cowboys. The head coach, Mike McCarthy, has said that he is considering using a committee at running back. I believe the quote is 2 or 3 backs, whatever it takes. Well, this makes things interesting, doesn't it? It makes Cowboys running back virtually undraftable, because you just do not know who gets the lion's share of the carries. You'd think it's between Rico Dowdle, Ezekiel Elliott, and Juice Vaughn. Now, as we talked about last week, Juice Vaughn's lining up in the slot, so you'd think it's quiet for him. But I certainly am not thrilled by that news, particularly if you're looking for a late round running back. Like, Zeke is there, and he's one of the better ones just because he's back home. And I thought at the time, he could go into a fair chunk of the workload, even if Dowdle is still prominent in the backfield. But, if they're going with more than 2 backs, I really have zero interest now.
Yeah, I reckon McCarthy's playing a bit of funny buggers there. I reckon it's going to be Zeke and Dowdle. He's probably going to be the 2 featured backs. I mean, Zeke just has to get goal line carries at this point, doesn't he? I mean, there's no one else that can take it away from him. Royce Freeman's there. He won't probably make the roster. It has to be Zeke. It has to be Zeke. I mean, if you take in Zeke in the 10th, 11th round in fantasy drafts, I think that's fine, based off maybe he's the running back 1 there. I mean, he's not going to eat like he used to, but he's probably still going to be a nice little depth piece for a team in drafts.
Yeah, you could do worse than picking up Zeke in late rounds of in a redraft this year, just because the upside is there for him to return to not to his peak, obviously, but to a low end RB2 sort of production, right? Which we haven't really seen from him in the last year or 2, probably 2 years in reality. There's no Tony Pollard there. If ever there was a time for Zeke to capitalize on a lack of competition at running back, it would be now, because if they really were keen on Rico Dowdle, right, they wouldn't have signed Zeke. That's just how I view it. I don't know, but yeah, I'd be happy to draft Zeke anywhere from the 11th round onwards, personally. Now, I've got here, and this is on the same level as the Juice Vaughn playing slot wide receiver in terms of excitement. N'Keal Harry is playing tight end for the Vikings. This means absolutely nothing to me, other than the fact that he's yet another bust draft pick from... who did he go to? Was it the Patriots? Yeah,
It was,
yeah,
yeah.
doesn't surprise me.
It was.
Him and Tyquan Thornton. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's a piss off, this one, because he's now trying to reinvent his career. He knows he's done at wide receiver. He's 6'4", well, maybe 6'5". So he's trying out the tight end position, but let's be honest, he won't make the roster. He'll be on multiple practice rosters all across the league, and maybe one day he might play a couple of snaps.
Watch him week 1 have 3 catches for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. That'd be such a jeez, that would be classic reverse Moss on him. Now, what is interesting this is very interesting for dynasty players. This one, I suppose. Treylon Burks. Now, he was a mid first round pick in rookie drafts a couple of years back. Well, he's going to have to impress on special teams to ensure that he's active on game day. He is gone. He's absolutely gone. The rapid demise of the asthmatic Treylon Burks, hey? Absolutely crazy.
It's such a shame. It's such a shame. Now they got Ridley as well. He's pretty much done. I'm pretty sure he's like 6'3", 6'4". He's a big, tall receiver. How would he ever cover a role in special teams? How?
He's just going to be a blocker. That's the only way he's going to be active on game day. He's just going to be blocking on the kick returns. Oh, that is hilarious. Anyway, well, yeah, Treylon Burks. If you've got him in dynasty, just cut him already. Put yourself out of your misery. Why do you have him still? He's not going to produce. Well, I suppose that's it for the news. We should head on over to our main topic of conversation today, which is quarterbacks. Now, we flagged last week that we'd go through quarterbacks. We've got 3 categories this week. Guys that can finish as the overall QB1, guys that can finish in the top 12, and good streaming options, which is the polite way of saying you don't need to draft these guys. They could probably stay on waivers or be your backup quarterback, right? Now, maybe the banner I've put here for good streaming option is slightly harsh, but we'll get to that as we go. I think the first one, it's the QB1 in the league, Patrick Mahomes. Now, he's got a greatly improved wide receiver call. We talked about it just before. Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice. Of course, here's Travis Kelce still. And Pacheco's a pretty handy pass catcher out of the backfield. He finished as a QB8 last year. Now, in the other years that he's been a starter in the NFL, he's finished in the top 5 in quarterbacks for fantasy. And that year that he's just had was with the weakest wide receiver core of his career comfortably. So to say that he doesn't bounce back now that he's got 2 high-level receivers added on to Rashee Rice in his second season for whatever they get out of him, I think it'd be very questionable if someone told me that he doesn't finish in the top 5 for quarterbacks this year. What are your thoughts?
Just looking at your stat line now from last year, he had 27 touchdowns, which is well below what he's ever had, apart from 1 year in 2019. Other than that, he had high 30s plus, and he had a career high 14 picks, and he had no rushing touchdowns at all. So there's a reason why he did end up at QB8 on the year. He had no weapons. Apart from Travis Kelce was getting doubled all year. Now they've just completely supported him, and he's. It's funny because we're talking how bad he was last year, and he won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's crazy now with the weapons that he's got. He could seriously just go nuts. He could be the QB1. Well, not comfortably, but he definitely a chance he can do it. There is other players there that you can always argue for, but there's no reason why he can't get up to 45 touchdowns on the year.
Yeah, you'd have to think if for whatever reason, right, for whatever reason, if Rashee Rice doesn't miss as much game time as we think, currently the rumor is half a season for Rashee. But if it ends up being 2 or 3 or even 4 games, and you're still getting, whatever that 14, 15 games out of him, we're really talking about Patrick Mahomes pushing 5,000 passing yards potentially here. He's got that good of a receiving core. Guys that are very much deep ball threats. They can stretch the field really well. The opportunity, he's got 4 high-level pass catches. It really is a great opportunity for him to breach the 5,000-yard mark, which I think he's done before. Has he done that before? Yeah.
Yeah, 2018.
I think he could go close to 2018
and
stats.
2022.
And 2022. There you go. Well,
Yeah.
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 Which he probably finished QB1 in both of those seasons, because I know he's finished twice. And off the top of my head, I imagine it's 2018 and 2022. So it just makes a lot of sense that Pat Mahomes finishes QB1 if Rashee Rice plays more than half a season.
Yeah, definitely. It's crazy how good this guy actually is. Like, seriously, it really is. I would take him in a Superflex league, and I had the number 1 pick. I've been picking Patrick Mahomes this year. And in a 1 QB league, his ADP is at around about 20. Well, actually, for sleeper, it's 38. Which is insane. They've actually got him as a QB4 currently on the year, which, again, I think is insane. But I would take him as the number 1 QB off the board, and probably around about pick 20, around about there. Between 20 and 25 is where I'd pick Mahomes, personally.
Yeah, like a late second round, I could get behind that. I would probably. I'd almost draft Josh Allen first, just because of the amount of rushing touchdowns he seems to score. And I feel as though that might not change this year with no true goal line back. But otherwise, Mahomes is a very, very good shout for overall QB1 this year. We'll talk on Josh Allen now, I suppose. He's a dual threat quarterback, as I just mentioned as well. 15 rushing touchdowns. The downside with him is that he threw a lot of picks downfield last year, and it wouldn't shock me if that continued. You've got no true deep ball threat. I think we talked about it last week. Keon Coleman can't stretch the field very well. Khalil Shakir is a slot guy. Dalton Kincaid's not a deep vertical threat. However, you've just got Curtis Samuel as a deep ball guy, which, if he's your sole guy, you just put, you're not going to get very open, right? So there is that. That's the major mark on him and his QB1 credentials. What are your thoughts?
So I'm just looking at his stats from 2020, actually. He finished as the QB1 in 2020, QB1 in 2021, QB2 in 2022, and then the QB1 in 2023. Each of those years, he's had 35, probably about 32 average touchdowns a year, which isn't that much when you think about it. But he's also had roughly about 600 yards rushing on the ground for the season, and then his rushing touchdowns last year, for example, he had 15 last year alone. So I don't think 15 touchdowns is sustainable, to be honest. I think that'll probably go down to more between 7 to 10 is probably where I think it'll end up next year. I don't think the offense will be as good, personally, unless Keon Coleman can turn it on. I think he's the real X factor for me, as I said last week. And his latest news is he's very excited about Keon Coleman. So if he really loves Keon Coleman, then, maybe his touchdowns will go to Keon Coleman. But, I would probably take him to number 2 personally. I don't like him higher than Patrick Mahomes. But yeah, I mean, I think that, what's his name? The running back. I can't think of his name now.
James Cook?
Who's their running back again? Yes, I think James Cook will be more involved in the goal line this year. So, yeah, I don't think 15 rushing touchdowns is sustainable moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think so either. My main thought is that, they've lost a lot of weapons. And if Josh Allen's attitude is, I've just got to do it all myself, then, he could finish as a QB1 for the, 4th time in 5 years, which is insane to think about. But you don't discount Josh Allen just because he doesn't have any true deep threat wide receiver. It's still Josh Allen, for crying out loud. You still draft him QB2. I'm happy to draft him QB1. Like, I actually am, just because he rushing yards wise, like, he might need to do that a bit. His rushing yards might go up even if his touchdowns go down. He will still be very, very much a dual threat quarterback. I'm happy to draft him QB1, but again, as we touched on it, you can't knock Mahomes this year at all. There is no flaw to him. Well,
yeah. It's one of those ones where, I mean, what would you do? Would you pick Mahomes or Josh Allen first? You pick Mahomes, wouldn't you?
I am pretty torn on it. I'd be happy to pick Allen. I'd be happy to pick Mahomes. I think I'd go Mahomes still, though.
Yeah, it's safe.
Yeah. Very safe. Pretty happy with it. Who's next on our list?
We have got Jalen Hurts is next on our list here. Now, again, this is going to be my bias heading into the Eagles because I hate the Eagles with a passion. As a Cowboys fan, we hate the Eagles. We hate Jalen Hurts. But if we're going to say something good about him, is he loves his old tush push. And I hate the tush push personally. I think it's such a shit play. But anyway, it gets rushing touchdowns and he gets the points. He keeps his offense still. He still keeps AJ Brown around. There was some rumors going around that he might lose AJ Brown last year, but he's stuck around. And obviously, they've just paid Devonta Smith. So, yeah, he was pretty pus end of the year, to be honest. But he still ended up being the QB2 on the year. I think he's definitely he's definitely a top 5, that's for sure. But he had 23 passing touchdowns last year with 15 interceptions. But he had 15 rushing touchdowns. Now, obviously that Kelsey's gone, so the tush push might not be as effective. But does that mean that his passing touchdowns go up?
Yeah, it's a tough question, isn't it? I don't know if he's as bad of a passer as what he was last year. And it's brutal to say that he was a bad passer, but he did only eclipse 300 yards. I think I've read that correctly, but 4 times. 4 times in 17 regular season games did he eclipse 300 yards, which is not great for a top 5 fantasy quarterback, You really do want him breaching 300 more than that. As we mentioned, I don't think he will throw as many picks as what he did last year. I think, the Philly offense as a whole was very... it was a bit... I think the right word here is way too run heavy, and it just meant that it didn't give Jalen Hurts great passing opportunities. Now, in my opinion, I hope that they revert back to a more balanced offensive scheme, particularly with no Jason Kelsey there, because if they're going to play the same way without one of, if not the greatest center of all time, they're going to find their way into a lot of trouble because I don't think the tush push is going to be as effective. I'm hoping that he keeps improving as a passer because he needs to. Because Philly's not going anywhere if he's putting up those numbers year in, year out. But I'm very negative. But then I'll say this: I think he could finish top 5, and probably will in fantasy. So does this all matter? Probably not, because he's just going to run more, and as long as he's aware that he should not force the ball like he did 15 times last year, and maybe instead go for a run himself if it's there. We're talking about a guy that can still push for QB1. And if he comes out and shoots the lights out in the throwing the ball, watch out because he could put up a Josh Allen-esque season.
Yeah, well, keep in mind, they've got a new OC this year in Kellen Moore. Now, Kellen Moore's been around a few teams now, but primarily the offense has been the focal point, obviously, for his game, and he loves moving the ball. Absolutely loves moving the ball. So I would assume, based off this, the passing attempts will increase, which would mean the touchdowns that he throws will also increase. So, yeah, I think that he has to support Devonta and AJ Brown a bit more. I think these guys they're ones to watch in redraft leagues because they've got top tier ability. So second half of the year last year, Jalen Hurts had a shoulder injury. He wasn't right. Let's be honest, he wasn't right at all. Sort of the last few games of the season, including playoffs, the tush push sort of got found out a little bit. Teams were stopping it. It wasn't really that effective. I think he needs to translate as a passer more, and I think he will. I seriously think he will, which is probably a bit scary for the Cowboys because we hate Jalen Hurts. But I think Jalen Hurts is still definitely a top 5 QB. I'd probably take him number 4 or 5 personally off the board. I mean, his ADP is really high in one QB leagues. It's 35. I think that's a bit too high for me. I'd probably more look in the 40s. But yeah, I think he's going to have still a good year.
Yeah. Look, he definitely needs to work on the picks because you can't throw 15 picks on that few passing attempts as an NFL quarterback. I hope he bounces back because he's actually quite fun. He's quite enjoyable to watch at full pelt, you know. And you could blame the poor performance on the shoulder injury, but like at the end of the day, he's never been a high level passer, but he does need to take that next step to become or to have a shot at the overall QB1. But I think we both think that he will, which is yeah.
Well, here's one for you, Guns. Here's one for you. Just to play on the rushing touchdowns, they've now got Saquon Barkley, obviously. Does he will obviously take away goal line carries from Jalen Hurts? They don't want him doing the tush push just in case he gets injured. Remember Carson Wentz did a knee off a QB scramble or QB push as such. So Saquon Barkley is definitely going to take some touches away from Jalen Hurts in terms of rushing. So he's going to have to throw. He's got no choice.
It's a good point. Now that either finds him out, they either find him out, and he gets exposed for not being a great passing quarterback, or he thrives, and we're sitting here saying he went very close to Patrick Mahomes for QB1. And I think I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he develops this year into being a much higher level passer.
I hope you're wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. Speaking of someone who developed a lot last year, Lamar Jackson. Now, got the MVP last year. He was I think statistically, you know, you wouldn't have given him MVP because it wasn't all that flashy. I'll get the numbers up here on him, but I think I saw someone compare it to Tyrod Taylor of 2015. Now, I was only a child back then, but Tyrod Taylor of 2015, as I found out on the internet, solid, but not an MVP. Now, last year, Lamar Jackson threw for the most passing yards of his career, 3,678 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And then rushing wise, he still ran for 821 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns. In that regard, I could see I think the passing yards stay the same, but you got to remember how many times they ran the ball on the goal inside the 5-yard line of it. Well, not inside the 5, but within 5 yards out from the goal line, or when they're in the red zone, they would always run the ball with Gus Edwards or Keaton Mitchell. This was under Greg Roman, of course, however. We've got a new offensive coordinator by the name of Todd Monken. Now, he was Georgia's offensive coordinator for the last 3 years, and he did some good work. He developed George Pickens, Jermaine Burton, Ladd McConkey, Zamir White, James Cook, and the greatest quarterback of all time, Stetson Bennett. Now, they're all high-quality college football players, and they all thrived under the offensive scheme of Todd Monken, right? So I really do think that although it will be a different offense, there will still be plenty of opportunity for Derrick Henry to run the football, and I think there will be plenty of opportunity for Lamar Jackson to show that he is a high-level passing quarterback in the NFL. And then, but the most important part of the Ravens offense is, can we let Lamar Jackson run for 850 to 900 yards? Because that's the way they win games, is with Lamar's legs in the third quarter, because he just breaks defenses. And countless amount of times he's broken a game open and they've gone on to thrash their opponent, even if the contest was tight going into the third quarter, just off a 40 or 30-yard rushing touchdown from Lamar. Now, my thoughts on him is that he can finish QB1 purely on a rushing basis, because his passing numbers, they've improved to where they need to be for elite NFL quarterback. And if we get a few more rushing touchdowns out of him this year with a change in offensive scheme, I really do think he'll push for QB1. What are your thoughts?
So Lamar Jackson last year had the most passing yards of his career, but that was also due to games played as well. I think he only played the full season once, and that was his rookie year. So he also had the most fumbles in his career last year as well. He had 11 fumbles, but 6 of them were lost. So 800 rushing yards, but only 5 touchdowns. I think they're going to stay very, very similar, his numbers. The only bad thing about Lamar Jackson, he gets injured a lot. So he's just a safe pick. He always is. That's if he's healthy. But, I don't think his numbers will change too much. He had 3,678 passing yards last year, which was a career high by over 500 yards. So maybe that's the outlier in his past years, but it should stay very, very similar, if anything.
Yeah, I've just noticed he's had 2 MVP seasons, both of which he's passed for over 3,000 yards. In his first MVP season back in 2019, he had 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 3,127 yards, and he also ran for 1,200 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Now, if we're getting that I don't think we're going to get 1,200 rushing yards now that you've got Derrick Henry in the building. and you're aware you need to really take care of Lamar because he's a bit fragile. But I think if you can get somewhere near, if he can maintain those passing numbers, and if he can really push 1,000 yards this season rushing, which would be crazy to think about, but if he can push the 1,000 yards and up those touchdowns a bit, I think we do have a genuine shot at a QB1 finish for him here. Yeah, I don't know. Would I draft him ahead of Jalen Hurts? I think yes, I would draft him ahead of Jalen Hurts. I don't know about you though.
I definitely would. I wouldn't expect his rushing touchdowns to increase by that much, if anything. It shouldn't go above 7 on the year. Then they got Derrick Henry. He had 5 last year. I think anywhere between 4 and 7 is probably likely. 7 on the real high side because that's actually his career high. So, yeah, I definitely would take him over Jalen Hurts. I think he's probably number 3 on my board. As I said, I'd probably go Mahomes, Josh Allen, and then Lamar. It's probably how I'd do it. But yeah, it's just a safe pick. And yeah, if he can get to 1,000 rushing yards in the year, as you said, he could be the QB1 just based off rushing yards alone.
Yeah. Well, who have we got next on our list, I suppose?
We have got my man. I love this man so much. He's changed one of my dynasty leagues right around, CJ Stroud. Now, this offense, seriously, it's going to be elite. It's going to be so fun to watch. He's completely changed the dynamic at Houston. He's already won a playoff game. It's just, yeah. From a fantasy perspective, it's hard because he doesn't really get your rushing yards and he doesn't really get your rushing touchdowns. I'm just looking at it now. He had 167 rushing yards last year on 3 touchdowns, which is actually quite high for 3 touchdowns for him based off 167 yards. But he had 4,108 passing yards on 23 touchdowns. So I expect the passing touchdowns to increase and the passing yards to maybe stay around about the same. But I mean, he finishes the QB11 last year in his rookie year. You'd expect that to increase, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, because like he also did miss 2 games in there, and he got injured during one of them as well against the New York Jets. What I like about him is that he only threw 5 picks on the year, and that's really good numbers because it just says to me like you've got a really high caliber passer. You've made him even better with the addition of Stephon Diggs. You've got an upgraded running back, which is just going to diversify that offense even more in Joe Mixon. The team across all facets is better than what it was last year, and they made the divisional round last year. Do I think the Texans can push for the AFC Championship? Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I think the powerhouse that is the Kansas City Chiefs will claim it, but I think, if they can get past Baltimore, they're a pretty good shot at the AFC Championship game. I think with everything he's got, he can push for QB1. Like we saw a lot last year, he's only going to get better as a rookie quarterback. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I do think he can finish QB1 just with what he's got around him.
Yeah, he's going to have to pass for 5,000 yards. He's going to do that because his rushing yards isn't anywhere near it. The only way he'd be able to do that, in my opinion, is if he can increase those rushing yards to about 500-ish. Is probably how he'd probably want to do it. Yeah, outside of that, if he's not going to do that, he's going to have to throw for 50 touchdowns next year. Again, in the offense that he's got, it's actually achievable, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he's probably a borderline top 5 pick for me for QBs. That's playing it safe.
Yeah. So, I've got him. I would draft him as my 5th quarterback. I would go Mahomes, Allen, Lamar. I would go Jalen Hurts at 6, And the next guy I'm going to mention, I'd go at 4, Anthony Richardson. Woo! Here we go. 2 full games he played last year. This is not a great start. However, in those 2 full games he played, a top 5 in the position. Okay? He ran 10 times a game in both of those. He now gets Adonai Mitchell. He's got Josh Downs in his second year. He's got Michael Pittman. He's got Jonathan Taylor. Everything is sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows over at Indianapolis. And it is time for Anthony Richardson to just say, I am Lamar Jackson. And he's going to copy exactly what Lamar did back in 2019 and win MVP. And everything will be great in the world.
This is such a hard pick. He could be, as you said, he could be the QB1, or he could be dead. Now, he's still got shoulder soreness. It's apparently not a big deal, and they reckon if there was a game tomorrow, he'd be able to play. I don't know about Richardson. I like him as a player. I really, really do. But it seems like he just wants to run guys over. That's just been his game style throughout his whole career. If he's going to do that, he's going to have a short lifespan in the league. Where would I take him? Now, currently he's going as... Well, in 1 QB leagues, he's currently at his ADP is 59. 59 is his ADP. Now, I'm going to play it on your end here, Guns. That is extreme value. If you were thinking he can be the QB1 and you get him at pick 62, that is extreme value. Now, I'll play the other side to it now, but he lasts 6 games and goes out with a season-ending injury. It's a wasted pick. Hardest pick of the draft for me is Anthony Richardson. He's capable of so much. He really is.
Yeah. And look, I'll take my bias off for a second that saying that Anthony Richardson's the best thing since Tom Brady, which he is. But Anthony Richardson, you could easily draft him in the 4th round, get your value, and if something does go wrong with him, you can say, okay, sure, it's my 4th round pick. It's not the end of the world, right? But you still get Anthony Richardson for a heck of a lot more value than what he should be drafted at, which I still think is in the mid to low 30s. Just off a simple what if. If he plays 17 games, I struggle to see how he isn't in the top 3 quarterbacks. But the fact that he's not going to play 17 games, you know it, I know it, from an unbiased perspective, he's not playing 17 games this year. I think if everything goes perfectly for him, he's QB1 and there's a little bit of a margin there for him. But it's just not going to go perfectly. It won't. And that's why I'm really sad, even though I'm trying to mask it with all this happiness. Because I'd love to see an Anthony Richardson MVP season. That'd make me so happy. But it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, this is the way I see it. This is probably the way I draft. Is if you take him at pick 62, you are going for a league championship, right? Straight away. Like, he could win you the league by himself in a 1 QB league. Now, in a Superflex league, he's going as the QB6, which is the 6th pick, which is obviously your 1st round. So, can you see where the risk is here?
I can see where the risk is here. And it's an excellent point. Because if you're drafting him as your main QB in a QB flex league and it's 6th overall, you're passing up on a lot of talent. Now, do you let him go? Possibly and probably. Let's be honest. Probably. You're going for someone more durable, particularly when the dude's actually only finished 2 NFL games in his life, right? When you've got Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, and Brock Purdy, who are well-established NFL starters who got the job done last year. I know in Jordan Love's case, it's only 1 year as a starter, but for the rest of them, they've got the job done for many years. They're safer picks than Anthony Richardson. And I don't think that's anything to dispute there. Anthony Richardson is not a safe pick by any means. And I don't think he's a QB1 in Superflex just because of the injury risk and the fact that you're burning such a high pick to draft him. However, if you like to live on the wild side, you draft Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I think in Superflex leagues, if you don't take him at 6,
He's not there.
I think someone takes him at 7.
And look, and the person who has 7, I don't envy them because you're sitting there, you've seen, they've taken Justin Jefferson because assumably 5 quarterbacks have gone before the 6th overall pick, and you've just seen Justin Jefferson go off the board. You're thinking, do I buck the trend as well and grab Christian McCaffrey, knowing that now there'll be a very, very solid quarterback there in the early-ish second round for me to take? Or do you say Anthony Richardson is still on the board? I draft him. If he plays 80% of the games this season, I go close to winning the league. There's a few ways you can play this one, and I don't know how I play it because without letting bias infiltrate my mind. I don't know how I play it without any bias.
So how's this, right? Now, this will be moving on to my next pick, but this is a good question for you. In a 2 QB Superflex league, would you draft Anthony Richardson at pick 6 or Joe Burrow at pick 6?
Now, the bias in me yelled out Anthony Richardson straight away. Okay. This is tough. This is really tough. Like, you've got Joe Burrow, he's got Jamar Chase. At the very least, he's got Jamar Chase and Jermaine Burton. How long he has T. Higgins for, we don't really know. But let's say he plays the whole of this year, right? Let's look at it that way. The best you can get at a Joe Burrow, not as much rushing upside, but and he's not actually as durable. I'm going Anthony Richardson because Joe Burrow being a durable guy is a bit of a miss.
So am I.
He's missed 2 shortened seasons. He's played 2 full seasons in the NFL. I get Anthony Richardson's just as much of a risk as Joe Burrow, I suppose, in that regard. Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson.
So would I,
easily.
and
yeah.
So would I. And I'm going to play the cards of T. Higgins isn't going to play a game for him, and it's definitely Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. You take
You've
T.
got
Higgins
Jamar
out.
Chase,
Yeah.
who's going to be the biggest. You got Jamar Chase there, who's the biggest weapon, or probably a top 3 weapon in the league, wide receiver. And then what do they got after that? Nothing. So he gets no rushing yards at all. He gets no rushing touchdowns. He's had 5. It's his career best in 2022. But he gets no rushing yards at all. That was his best year at 250. So you take T. Higgins out of that lineup, let's say for argument's sake, and they've got no one. They've got Zach Moss at running back, who really is unproven. Let's be honest. He's been around Zach Moss, but he tried to fill in best he could last year for Jonathan Taylor. He did all right, but the second half of the year was pretty crap. So you take T. Higgins out, and the offense looks crap.
Yeah, it does. Look. Yeah, I think you still do take Anthony Richardson ahead of Joe Burrow, but I think you could sweet talk me into taking Kyler Murray ahead of Anthony Richardson, which is crazy to think about, because 12 months ago I was thinking, has Kyler Murray finished up in Arizona rather, and Anthony Richardson's just come onto the scene. You're thinking, oh, geez, this kid's going to be, Cam Newton 2.0 sort of thing. right? And he still very well could. But now you're sitting here like Kyler Murray's a well-established starter. He's got one of the better wide receivers to be drafted in the last 10 years in Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride just had a stellar second half of the season. They've added another running back who's of a pretty high caliber. You know, you could convince me to take Kyler, but we'll get to that later. Who is the quarterback that you were going to mention here with your next pick?
It was actually Joe Burrow.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I'm playing the cards of T. Higgins isn't playing because from all accounts, unless he gets paid, he ain't playing. He's holding out. So that offense is just so bad without him. It's got Jamar Chase who'll probably get double teamed. And as I said, their tight end is Mike Gesicki. Their running back is Zach Moss. Their other receiver is, I don't know, Trenton Irwin is probably their wide receiver 2 now. Or Jermaine Burton, or that's it. So, yeah, Mike Gesicki, Tanner Hudson is their tight ends. It's pretty yuck.
Yeah, I've just looked at it now. Like, unless you're adamant that Chase Brown can take this offense by storm, there's not much. It hasn't got much going for it. Because as you say, teams, it's very easy just to double team Jamar Chase and make Joe Burrow throw to one of the other unproven wideouts, right? And you know, you're trusting a lot on Zach Moss, who's been a backup for the majority of his career. I think he could be a serviceable starter, but I think he's a serviceable starter on a pass first team, not a run first team. You know, I'm just not sure if this Bengals offense is going to be good enough to give Joe Burrow a QB1 finish. I reckon he could still finish in the top 12 if T. Higgins hangs around. I don't think Joe Burrow has QB1 overall, but he can finish in the top 12. Yeah, I mean, look, I like him, but I like Joe Burrow. He's a great quarterback, but he hasn't got much going for him offensively this year.
Yeah, so if T. Higgins actually plays, I like Joe Burrow. He's probably my 7th, 8th QB on the board. But that's just based off T. Higgins actually playing. Now, if he doesn't, I think I'd avoid at all costs, to be honest. It's just nothing that I love. Yeah, I mean, he provides nothing on the ground at all. Like, literally nothing. So, yeah, I would probably avoid if it was just Jamar Chase and co, to be honest.
And it's not a elite O-line either that he's playing behind. This is part of the reason he gets banged up, because he's not playing behind an elite O-line. It means he's getting sacked a fair bit. It's hurting him because he's missed the best part of 2 seasons in the NFL already, and we're 4 seasons into his career. He's not a safe pick by any stretch, and he's actually quite a bit of a red flag for fantasy this year, as you've mentioned. Someone who I know you will say isn't a red flag, but I will say is I don't know, like he's a middling pick to me. Dak Prescott. He'll get the job done in the regular season, but he won't get the job done at the end of the season.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I couldn't agree more. He's a great fantasy weapon because he's not really afraid of passing the ball. And he loves padding his stats late in games as well. So for a fantasy perspective, you got to love that, right? If they're down in games, you've seen it before, he'll come out and just dominate. When the game's done, he'll pass for 400 yards and have 4 touchdowns. Perfect for fantasy. Absolutely perfect. Now, the only concern that I've got with Dak is if they can't sort out CD Lamb before the season starts, then I think he holds out and doesn't play. He's fully deserving of anything he's asking for contract-wise because he's a top 3 receiver in the league for sure. And outside of CD Lamb, they've got Brandon Cooks. So, yeah, I don't know. He's a safe top 10 pick. He finishes the QB3 last year, played every game. And yeah, he threw for 4,500 yards. I don't think he's doing that again.
Yeah, it's going to need CD Lamb to back up what he did last year for Dak Prescott to replicate those numbers. But like, I don't think you can't really go wrong with Dak Prescott as your QB1. Like, he's not going to hurt you. Sure, he probably have 2 games where it can be a little bit ugly. But outside of that, he's going to well and truly make up for in some of the beatdowns that the Cowboys tend to give out. So I'm okay with it. Like, I really am. I'm okay with drafting Dak Prescott as my QB1. In saying that, I don't think he can, like, CD Lamb had a career year. Dak Prescott had close to one of the better years of his career, if not the best. I don't think he's got it in him to finish QB1. You do need a rushing quarterback to finish QB1, or you need to have the perfect situation. And I don't think Dak Prescott has the perfect situation there, particularly when there's a massive drop-off between wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2.
Yeah. It's one of those ones where he's definitely a fantasy asset. But is he a real-life NFL winner? No. Let's get that out of the way first and foremost. But yeah, look, I would probably draft him as a QB1 myself. I would absolutely do it in fantasy. He's fine. It was actually his second best year of his career. He had a year where he actually threw for nearly 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. So that's pretty damn good. So yeah, I don't know if you can back it up. The only good thing about Dak this year is he's playing for a massive, massive contract for years going forward. So contract years, I think I would actually target him as the 8th, 9th, 10th QB. He's got something to prove, right? He wants to get paid. So I just think guys in contract years, I always go for because they've got something to prove.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I suppose we'll look at the next quarterback we've got here. Who's our next quarterback on the list?
I have got here your man Kyler Murray.
Go. All right.
So he's an interesting one, Kyler Murray, right? Like he could be either the QB5 on the year, or he could be the QB12. You just don't know what he's going to produce. Now, when he bounced back last year, he absolutely tore the house down. Like, he threw for 200 plus yards a game on the ground. He was pretty good. Rushing touchdowns would pretty much won a game. And now he's got in one of the best prospects that you will find at wide receiver, as you said, for the last 10 years, in Marvin Harrison Jr. So the sky's the limit. But what's his floor?
Well, for me, like his floor, you mentioned QB12. I think it is around that, purely because those rushing numbers they elevate him quite high. Like even last year, we're talking 244 rushing yards in 8 games, fresh off an ACL tear. Right, he's second year removed from that now. And usually athletes, when they're second year removed from an ACL tear, they bounce back to their peak performance. Back in 2020, Kyler Murray finished with 378 fantasy points on the season, averaging 23.7 a game. I'm not entirely sure where that ranks in his career or where he ranked that year, but just off a numbers perspective, looking at the numbers here, it's a good finish. if he can return to Kyler of 2020 fame, I think we've got a really good prospect here because he pushed for 4,000 yards in the same season, 26 touchdowns on the year, and that was with a prime DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not saying that Marvin Harrison Jr. in his rookie season is going to match prime DeAndre Hopkins, but I will say that you've got Kyler Murray, who's not a second-year player like he was back in 2020. He's a lot more experienced now. He's back to full health. He can run a little bit still. He can run quite a lot still, rather. I think you've got a really good prospect here. I don't think he can finish as the overall QB1, but I think he can definitely finish in the top 5 just because of that rushing floor that he'll give you. If things go bad offensively, though, what are we looking at here? Probably a high-end QB2 for the season. So anywhere from, 16 to 13 in a finish. I think that's well within his range of outcomes.
That's fair. I'm just looking at his previous years as you were yourself. He has the potential to have some big blow-up games that will win you matchups. Like back in your year 2020, as you were saying, he's had the games here. He's gone for 32 fantasy points. He's gone for 29 fantasy points. He's gone for 35 fantasy points. He's gone for 37 fantasy points. Like he has got some big blow-up potential. So, where would I take Kyler Murray? I'd probably take Kyler Murray as probably the QB 10. And I'd be very happy with that too, because currently Kyler Murray's ADP in 1 QB leagues is 80. That is insane value.
Yeah.
That is insanity. Absolute insanity. In 2 QB leagues, he's going as a QB 13. So
what's that, like a 16th pick, probably?
I don't know. Sorry, no, he's going as the overall 13th pick.
Oh, right. Okay. I'd be happy with him as my QB1. Very comfortable with him, actually. I just think, as I've touched on,
sorry. If you took him at pick 80 in a 1 QB league, that is honestly nuts. You'd love that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I just think that
sorry. In in 10-team leagues, you get him in the 8th round.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it? It's really good. It's just, I keep harping on about it. It's the rushing floor. I think it sets him up greatly for success this year. He's got a much improved offense. I like there's a lot there that I like about Kyler Murray this year. Speaking of a guy who has a lot there for him this year, Jordan Love. You talk about a team that really came on leaps and bounds last year. Like they'd lost Aaron Rodgers. It was a very young offense. A lot of questions about it, but they've come along and they really did impress. Jordan Love impressed. She's shown that you can see a first-round quarterback behind the starter for 4 or 5 years. And I think there'll be a few teams now that have noticed this. And I'm surprised that the Rams didn't actually consider drafting a quarterback this year and sitting them. And maybe that's what the Falcons have done. Maybe they've said, you know what, it's okay. We're happy to sit Penix for 3 years behind Kirk Cousins because we've seen that makes them really high-quality starters from the moment they set themselves onto the field. Now, Jordan Love, pretty good stats last year. I'll get them up here, but he had Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, and Dontavian Wicks. 2 or 4 pretty good wide receivers. He also had Luke Musgrave, who another rookie tight end who really did make himself an NFL starter last year himself. In terms of his stats, he threw for 4,159 yards last year, 32 touchdowns, 11 picks. Yeah, you could, at a pinch, you would say that he threw a few too many interceptions. But as if that's not going to change, he has a little bit of a rushing game, 247 yards, 4 touchdowns. You're not drafting him for his rushing, but you're certainly not against, you'd be very content with that sort of production. I don't think he's a QB1. Or I don't think he can finish as the QB1, rather, but I think he can finish as a QB1, as a top 12 guy. I would assume that as this offense gets more mature and more experienced in the NFL, they will continue to get better. You've added in Josh Jacobs last year. The running game wasn't perfect. I will say that. That was probably the weakest part of their offense. The running game wasn't great. You throw in Josh Jacobs, a 3-down back of a very high caliber, and we're cooking with gas in Green Bay.
I actually expect Jordan Love to get better. Look at his second half of the year last year. Look from probably about week 10 onwards. He went berserk. Outside of his week 14 game against the Giants, he went berserk. Like, he had games there, he had 26, 23, 24, 28. Like, that's great. And he did it without his QB1 in Christian Watson. He hardly played all year, Christian Watson. So if they can keep him healthy, that's, again, another weapon to Jordan Love's arsenal that didn't really get used last year. I love Jaden Reed. I actually really like Christian Watson. So I actually expect this guy to take the next step in his career and actually cement himself as a QB1.
Yeah, I do too, because, is there anyone better to learn in the league right now than Aaron Rodgers? And that's what he did from 2020 to 2023. It's really good development for the guy. And I'm not surprised at all. A touch surprised that he was so good so early, but I'm not surprised that he's become a high caliber NFL starter and will continue to develop and maybe push into the elite category in 2 or 3 years' time. In terms of fantasy finishes, I don't think he can finish as a QB1 without, as we mentioned, without that rushing upside. You can't really finish as a QB1, but I think he can be one of the more reliable and consistent quarterbacks that you can draft this year. Am I taking him over Kyler Murray? No, I'm taking Kyler Murray every day of the week, just because Kyler Murray can get within maybe 10 or 15% of him as a passer, but then also run for 650, 700 yards. And that just sets him apart and puts him
one step
above. Sorry. Yep.
You know what's funny? He actually finishes the QB5 last year, albeit that all the QBs pretty much died halfway through the year. There was a few injuries last year, so let's try and take that away from the fact that he did finish as a QB5. But why can't he do it again? I think he can.
Well, let's put it this: that's an absolute ceiling. He can finish QB5. I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't be against the shout that he can finish in the top 5. I'm just skeptical that he's got a high ceiling on him in fantasy. I understand we were talking about him pushing these 30 points a game at certain stages in the back half of last year, but teams have got another whole year worth of footage to analyze. They can figure him out. There wasn't much on him last year. There's a lot more on him this year. I think, with the Green Bay offense is exciting, but I'd rather the depth pieces than Jordan Love here, personally.
Fair enough. I'm going to move on to the next pick here, and this is probably one of the most interesting picks. I'm not going in your order here, Guns. I'm actually going off order here.
Fair enough.
Would you take Jordan Love, or would you take Trevor Lawrence?
Now this is interesting. Like, I'm aware that you've added, from a Trevor Lawrence's perspective, you've added in Brian Thomas. You've got Gabe Davis, who you've also brought in. You've got Christian Kirk. You've got Evan Engram. Travis Etienne's a great running back as well. You're almost like they've both got equally good weapons. Maybe the ones that Trevor Lawrence has are more experienced, but I think the ceiling on these guys is pretty similar. So you're basically telling me who's the better pure quarterback, Jordan Love or Trevor Lawrence? And, well, I've still got to say Jordan Love.
I think I agree with that.
Yeah.
So Trevor Lawrence is going to his 4th year this year. The best he's finished is a QB 8. It was in 2022. And he's only thrown for 25 touchdowns as his career best. So he's going to have to go for 30 plus, seriously, because he doesn't really offer a hell of a lot on the ground. Oh, in saying that, he did rush for about 340 yards last year, which isn't too bad, I suppose, but it's on the average spectrum. But yeah, I mean, he finishes the QB 13 last year. That's just an average year, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I now, of course, if you want to go super deep into it, Calvin Ridley dropped about 6 or 7 touchdown passes off Trevor Lawrence last year. He was bad, Calvin Ridley. He might bounce back this year, but that whole year missing because of suspension that really hurt him. Because it's sort of it really did take the sting out of his ability last year. There was a lot of drop catches, particularly in the end zone as well. It cost them a lot of yardage and a lot of points. Now, to say that maybe even 60 to 70% of those get taken, we're talking about him finishing in that QB9, QB10 range, right? This is Trevor Lawrence, of course, but I think the opportunity is there for Lawrence to have a big year if he develops as a passer. If he doesn't, and he still can't get it done with all this around him, we start to ask questions about him as a long-term NFL quarterback. Yeah, that would be my primary concern.
Jaguars coach Doug Peterson said the organization has been working tirelessly on getting an extension done with Trevor Lawrence. That's interesting, right? Because that's interesting. I mean, I would probably do it too. He's only 24 years old, and it's just hard to get a decent QB in the league. So from an NFL perspective, I would probably sign him up immediately, personally. But now that he's got Christian Kirk again, Brian Thomas, and now he's got Gabe Davis. I'm not really too big on Gabe Davis, but it's a long ball threat. He can have these big blow-up games. I expect him to be better. I seriously do. Now, I don't know how much better he can actually get, but realistically, he should be hitting top 10s. If he stays healthy, top 10 should really be the goal for Trevor Lawrence. But yeah, it's a hard one, right? You just don't know what Brian Thomas is going to do. You don't know what Gabe Davis is going to do. And Christian Kirk's probably the safe option.
Yeah, and you've got Evan Engram there as well. He's very safe. Finished as tight end 2 on the year last year, I saw this today. All right, well, we've probably dragged it out a bit more than we thought we would, so we'll come back next week and we'll cover part 2, where we'll talk about guys like Brock Purdy, Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, Aaron Rodgers, just to name a few. And we'll cover the news that's been. Remember, just if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, make sure you download and give us a 5-star rating. We'll be back next week with more NFL insights. Matt, thank you for coming on as always. And see you next week.